What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends at the end of March. Anyways, as far as the market's going, looking at SPY, we are seeing the possibility of an inverse head and shoulders. But we're starting to look weak this morning. So if we can't hold our supports, we have to watch this low right here. If we don't hold that, we're going to be at risk of dipping lower to this gap all the way down here, if not to retest lows. But if we can make a higher low here, if we could hold this low, then this needs to bounce very, very soon for this to continue to uptrend. So I'm going to give you guys more insights about this, what's going on so far. We just got initial jobs claims. Everything is very close to expectations. So is the Philly Fed data. Employment is looking decent, and prices are a bit elevated. At 10 o'clock a.m., we have existing home sales coming in, might cause a little bit of volatility. Then at noon, we have the 4 and 8 week bill auctions. So just keep all of that in mind. Um, Also, the market's going to be responding to Jerome Powell still. So I want to make it very clear that Jerome Powell said some good things and some bad things. The not so good things for the economy is the fact that we're expecting another surge in inflation. There's going to be a big disruption in the labor market over time. Jerome Powell thinks it's going to be very minor. At least that's what he's trying to tell us, and we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. But the big thing is that there's going to be another, increase in inflation, and the Fed's going to be in no rush to cut until they see what ends up happening. But the good news that came out is the fact that for the longer term, heading into like 2 years out, the Fed does expect their 2% inflation rate to be met. And then simultaneously, they also think that they're going to be cutting a little bit more than expected previously, for the next like 1 to 2 years. So in essence, there's some good stuff coming out. The short term does have some risks. The longer term does look a little bit better, at least to some extent, according to what the Fed is telling us. But there's still a lot of uncertainty associated with tariffs, prices, and the things that affect things. That's why the Fed is trying to be very, very cautious. That's why I just want to give you guys a warning that, the market could interpret this as bullish or bearish, and we're just waiting to see what the real reaction is going to be. That's why you have to be very, very patient. Jerome Powell causes a lot of volatility, and this volatility can last multiple days even after he speaks. And then on top of this, I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy on the news. I'm just seeing minor pieces of news. Later on, we have Nike and FedEx announcing earnings, and then we have NEO on Friday, so just keep that in mind. So what's happening with the charts right now? SPY has support very close to about 563.84. We need to hold around that 563 area, and just keep in mind that there's the possibility of an inverse head and shoulders here, right? This is kind of like we have a left shoulder, we have this head, then we could be attempting to form a right shoulder if right here, if we make a higher low. If we make a higher low, we could continue to uptrend like this and get back up to 575, especially if we break past 569. But there's a big but. There's also the possibility of a bearish divergence. And if we fail here, so if we end up dipping and we can't hold 563, I'm going to be looking for a retest of 559. If that does not hold us, then we could be forming kind of like a double top here. And that could be followed by even more downside, and the downside can also be followed by a bigger move for us to continue lower. So it depends, because with Jerome Powell and FOMC, you can interpret things he said as bullish and other things as bearish. Could go either way. That's why you want to be very, very open-minded. So we'll see. I think that we dip a little bit more here. We dip just a bit. If we could hold above 563, though, there is hope for us to retest 568, and we need to break past that to remain bullish. If we could hold above 568, that's going to be a better sign. So we will see if that ends up being the case or not. So just keep that in mind. That's what's going to be very, very important. So as time goes on, we have to be very, very patient, and we have to see if we get enough buyers to step in, and then we'll see if the trends remain bullish, especially as time progresses. Looking at the QQQ, we're seeing the same thing. So make sure when we dip, I just want to see SPY make a higher low. That's all I care about. I don't care how low. I just want to see a higher low before we try to bounce. If not, it's going to be a bad sign. Anyways, looking at the QQQ, is the same thing. The issue with the QQQ is that even though we have a double bottom here, we're starting to dip a bit with Nvidia and these other big tech stocks. So we're trying to make a higher low around that 473 area. If that does not hold on the QQQ, it's going to be a bad sign this morning. So please be very, very careful. If So there's a bearish case, there's a bullish case. You guys have to remember that. So if we just hypothetically end up seeing this dip, so if we have a double top forming, you want to see us basically reject and fail at 473. Then we could be looking for this gap fill down here, then a retest of the lows if that ends up failing. So if we can't hold this low right here, make sure you guys are very, very careful. I think it's going to be a very, very big test, and you guys have to be ready just to be safe. But on the other hand, right, if we see the opposites, if this low holds, if we can make a higher low here, I do think we dip a little bit more. But if we can make a higher low, it is possible we try to bounce back into 480, and we have to get back up to 485 or above to continue to uptrend for us to see a slanted inverse head and shoulders like this, a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder. We have to see if that ends up being the case. So with that being said, be very, very patient. For the Russell 2000, we also have kind of like an inverse head and shoulders. I need to see this break past 207 to remain bullish. Now, if we end up losing 204, we could turn back down. In my personal opinion, I think that it's the same thing. I want to see it hold around 203 at the very least. Look for a decline close to 203. We need to bounce off of that for this to remain bullish. If we lose 203, we could be losing these lows. There's going to be a risk of us coming down to fill this gap at 199. On ES, not looking that great. I do see a possible, the inverse head and shoulders scenario, but we need this low to hold. I want to see us hold at least 56.50. If that holds and we make a higher low, then yes, we could continue like this. But if we lose support at 56.60, then we could be dipping back down towards the low 5600s, especially off this bearish divergence. So we'll see how it goes. I do see a potential for an inverse head and shoulders. If we get a bounce, I would like to see us break past 57.50. If that's the case, then yes, we could be looking for a much bigger push up here towards 5800. So we'll see. For now, the move is this. We do dip a little bit more here, but we have to see if this low holds. If we could hold this low, then yes, I do think we try to bounce back up towards 5800. If we don't hold the low, we could be dumping more, forming a double top. So it all depends on if we get that bounce. Watch and see if we get a bounce near where we are or not. That's going to be very important. With NQ, I need to see us bounce, get back above 20,000. If that's the case, we're going to be looking for this to continue to uptrend towards 20,400. If we lose the low here at 19,600, we could be dipping back down. But because of the fact that we have a double bottom, there's a lot more potential. We have a potential like left shoulder. This is like our head. And this could be a right shoulder if this low holds. We need this low to hold for it to bounce and get back above 20,000. If we lose 19,500, I'm going to be concerned. So watch and see a small decline right here, and we'll see if we get that bounce. For Bitcoin, we're barely holding the trend line. I think 84,000 could be tested, but we need to bounce and continue to uptrend for 87,000. For NQ, sorry, not NQ, Nvidia, we're actually looking a little weak right here. Although there is an inverse head and shoulders, we might be retesting this low. It might get close to like 115, but we got to hold the low. We need to see us hold 114. I would like to see that for this to try to continue. If we lose 114, we could be dipping back down towards 111, so be very careful with this. For Tesla, we're looking relatively weak because of the fact that we have kind of like a wedge right here. I would like to see Tesla try to hold support. I do think we might be dipping a little bit more towards 230 or so. And then if this holds, we could attempt to bounce back up towards like, the 239 area. But we'll see as we're getting tighter and tighter. If we end up losing the support, then we could be looking for a dip back down towards that like 222 area. So we'll be very, very patient nonetheless. But that's what I'm essentially seeing. If we break past 237, we're looking for a bigger rebound. But I do think we dip first before it tries to see some kind of rebound. If we don't hold this trend line, we're going to be at risk of 225, then 215. So we'll see. I do see a small decline right here. So look for a bit of a dip when we open. But be careful to see if support holds and if we can get that bounce or not. Apple installed 215 to bounce. If not, we could be dipping to like 210. Just a few more. We have Coinbase. We have resistance around 200 and support around 178. We need to hold 187. If not, we could be dipping to like 180. If this does hold, we could try to bounce, but I do see risk of some downside. Amazon has support right here around 191, resistance around 200. We're going back and forth right now, so we could be dipping back down to 192, and we'll see if we bounce. We'll look for a little bit more downside. Meta's making lower highs, rejecting on 420 EMA, so this could be dipping back down to about 575 or below. If we break past 593, we could try to bounce. Otherwise, it's looking a bit more bearish. Microsoft is kind of in the middle. We have like an inverse head and shoulders. I need to see it break past 389 to bounce. Otherwise, we could be dipping to about 383. So be careful. Google's kind of stuck in the middle. We'll see if we break past 165.8 and then eventually 168. Might be dipping to about 162, so give it some time. So be very, very patient. I also want to add that the VIX is trying to hold our 200 EMA around this 19.61 area. If that holds, we could try to bounce for basically 21.6. If we lose support, we could be dipping. So we'll see if we break past the 22s to be bullish or if we reject. We're in a range right now, so we're going to wait and see. So for now, the reaction to Jerome Powell is very nuanced. We tried to bounce yesterday, but now we're starting to slow down during the pre-markets. There might be another decline move coming, but then we'll see if we get a bounce later on. We'll want to see if we can make higher lows or not. Otherwise, this is going to continue to decline. I think it's that simple. So be very, very mindful and be patient, guys. Thank you for listening and peace out.